Hey Fred, Diddy needs more baby oil brought to his hotel. Stat. Copy you.
You started off. You went to USC, which is the equivalent of like Harvard Law School when it comes to filmmakers and filming. And before we go any further, because we just talked, I do want to introduce everybody to our filmmaker today, Clay Westervelt, who's joining us, because we just got caught up talking. So I want to make sure we introduce. But being at USC, you won, if I'm not mistaken, you won the Kodak or the Kodiak and then the Bush Awards. How did that influence your early choices in your career?
I think it gave me a lot of confidence. I had gone to undergrad at University of Iowa, and we there. The program was we made just a lot of films, so you got a lot of experience. You did everything kind of by yourself the whole way through. There was so you would write the script, you'd shoot it, you'd light it, you'd direct it, you'd hopefully try to get somebody to run the boom for you. Like it was, you did everything though, and it did give you. So I came out of there feeling very confident that I could get an exposure on the film, but I did not do any really artistic work there. Like it's so I came away from there thinking I did not want to do filmmaking anymore. Like when I got into USC, I applied to USC just because I thought I won't get in, and that'll be my excuse of why I'm not pursuing this line anymore. I was totally surprised to get in, and I thought, all right, well, I'll go, but at least I know one thing, which is I never want to touch a camera again. Because I honestly, from that experience, I came out of it thinking that I had the opinion, because you had to do everything by yourself. I came away from it with the opinion that like camera work was just an opportunity to screw up, and like all you could do is forget to set the focus, forget misload the film, forget to set your aperture. There's just so many ways you can screw it up, from beginning to end. And I did not see. I was so stuck in the technical that I couldn't get into the artistic at all. And then I was ready to quit after the first semester of USC because it was the same thing where you kind of did everything by yourself all the way. And then I stuck it out, and the second semester changed everything. And that's when you work in a partnership. And this is kind of what we were talking about here, I guess, because for the first time, everything was way more interesting. And now you are the director and I'm the cinematographer, and I'm going to be the editor and you're going to do sound or whatever. All of a sudden it became about communication instead of you doing it by yourself all the way through. Like now, no matter how much we talked about it going into it, it was never going to be exactly the way either one of us saw it. It was always going to change. And that was so much more interesting to me, And the fact that I could just concentrate on I had a partner who was a very talented filmmaker. We had very different views on things. So I was like, I don't understand at all what he's doing, but I could concentrate on making it look the way I thought he wanted it to look, and that was terrific. And it was the first time I started really being able to think artistically. I was very proud of the way that film turned out, and that was what won the Bush scholarship, I think, and the Kodak scholarship, and it really did change everything, Nice. And I could then see the value of. And it's something I go back to frequently because, as you know, as the industry has changed here, like it's gone on this big loop, and now I'm getting called again to do so many like one-man band stuff where you're having to do your own audio, do your own camera, pull your own focus and everything like that. And on the one hand, that those are skill sets that I retain. I can still do that, but it changes the game entirely. It's not as much fun as it is. There are times when that's the appropriate way of doing it. There are times when you have a project where that is what fits with that, it feels great. But there are times where that's not the right way to do it, and you really wish you had that support. And I think that's really what I've taken away from that, is like having a better sense of when you need the people and when you don't, but that is what that did for me, I think, is it gave me a lot better sense of confidence that like, okay, maybe I have learned a thing or two.
What was your first one out of school? What was your first job out of school?
My first job out of school, my friend S. Leo Chang and he's a documentarian, very good documentarian. And Tom Holman, who was a professor at USC, he's the guy who invented THX for George Lucas for the whole sound system thing. Like he worked at Lucasfilm and did all this. And he came up to me one day. I had been his intern, not really, or like an assistant or whatever. It was like getting paid minimal. First thing I did, I guess, was I edited his book for Sound for Film and Television, and his the way he expressed it in the write up was that I like contributed significantly to its readability by laymen. So I dumbed it down. I was basically like, that guy is so smart, and there were times where he would like have these great illustrations of like, picture sound propagation as a balloon that is inflating, where it is blowing up, where the rate of blow up is, and it's oscillating at whatever the surface is vibrating at whatever the wavelength is of the sound pitch, and then picture that the rate of blow up is equal to the speed of sound. And I said, like, how about we say the rate of inflation of the balloon? He's like, you know that word? I was like, everybody knows that word, Tom. And he was like, great. But he's such like a brilliant engineer. He does not know what do average folks comprehend. So that was the first one. But then the first production job was... Tom came over and said, like, hey, I gave your name to a friend of mine. I hope that's okay. He's got a project. I was like, is your friend named George? Yeah. That sounds pretty good.
They got a Star Wars going around?
But that was not it. It was not the friend. It was a different friend. So Leo and I teamed up to shoot the Hollywood Gay Square Dance Convention. and then we had to sell... The deal was like we would make money by selling the copies, and they were like, okay, and so we're like, I don't know what we're in for here, but it was wild. It was like, because all these guys were outcasts because they're square dancers, and so that but they were like,
the West Hollywood community is not accepting them.
It was not. Yeah, they don't. And so we made all these VHS copies. Then we said, well, we gotta take orders. And Leo was like, well, I'm not putting my address on there. And I was like, all right. So we got a P.O. box. It turned out the P.O. box, we found out the P.O. box we got had previously belonged to the Cindy Cox fan club. So porn star, and so you recognize her, okay?
Oh no, I was just going with that. So, Cindy, if you're watching, no.
So now I know all those Penthouse letters are fake for sure, because the letters that come in are really. We read all of them. We're like, what? It's terrible.
Does it help you as you're going out and working to know what a line producer now does because you had to do it, or know what a gaffer has to do because he did it? Is that something that you feel helps you in how you're going about capturing that content?
Yeah, I definitely think so.
Yeah.
Right? I mean, like anytime you understand what somebody else is up against, it surely makes you a lot more patient with them. If they're,
Unless you're a line producer.
Well, if you're...
Then you're just not
if they're good at what they're doing, right? If they're good at what they're doing, it makes you a lot more patient with what they're up against.
Exactly.
If they're bad at what they're doing, it makes you very impatient because you know damn well that it could be done better and quicker than that.
Oh.
So, but I would take having the knowledge over not having it, right?
Yeah.
Don't you think?
But that was something that I noticed working with you anyways. You always carried a very easy demeanor on set. You as a director, as a leader on set, and as a person that a lot of times is we're all looking to for what's going on. You always kept a level head. You always kept patience in play, which is not something that not only haven't done in general, but most people don't. But you did a very good job on that. Yeah.
Well, I would disagree. I think you always keep a very level head from what I've seen. So whatever's going on behind the scenes, I don't know.
Yeah, it's that duck in the water thing going from there. What qualities do you think it's essential to be a good filmmaker or storyteller?
I mean, I guess I would say, as a storyteller, as a filmmaker, being a good listener first off, right? And a lot of times I've gone to try to describe the difference between the demands of directing versus DPing, right? And like as a DP, you should probably be the quietest person on set. Like you should be listening to everything and everybody. You should not be talking unless you have to. Like same thing as a camera operator, you know, like you're it's kind of a fun gig in that you really get to sit back, see what's going on, and particularly in documentary, like you can get the talent to stand where you want them to stand, or to not go where you don't want them to go, just based on where you position yourself. You know, you stand in front of the TV, they're not gonna press you out of the way to go to the TV unless they really have to, right? So you're gonna be able to make them go where you want just by virtue of your presence, if you're careful about it, and you don't have to say a word. Whereas in directing, you're constantly having to think through what everyone else needs from you, right? What not only what does the story need from you first off, but then what do each of your players, each of your actors, each of your crew members, what do they need from you for you to help them accomplish what the story needs them to do? And it's just so much thinking goes into it a lot of times, I think. And because you're a coach and you're a cheerleader sometimes, and it's so much energy, and a lot of times the way I describe it is like, at the end of the day, I could be DPing, I could be shooting a documentary or a narrative or whatever, I could be doing handheld all day long, lugging gear, and at the end of one of those days, I might be physically exhausted, but I could still go out for dinner or drinks or whatever, and be like a reasonably fun person to be around. But at the end of the day of directing, like you just don't want to be around anybody. You just want to like veg out or just be alone. Like it's mentally and emotionally exhausting in a very different way. Yeah. And those are the type of things that, like, I think a lot about what I learned in school and what we were taught in school, and I think about it as my kids are growing up, and just how many things there are that are essential in those jobs that you have that nobody really tells you about. And there's not really necessarily a good way of learning that until you go experience it yourself, and then you realize how different the energy of being an AD is from being a director, how different the energy of being, and how different it feels to be a producer on something than to be a director.
I say the worst job on a set is the assistant director. I don't understand how anybody would ever.
It's a thankless job. It's like you're working for a C the whole time.
I don't get as much heat in my job as an AD gets in theirs. I don't. It's such a skill.
I feel like the AD was probably the job that was worst explained to us at USC, and I wouldn't find that out until
until it happened.
Until way later. Like working, I did a lot of behind. I came out of school like just as like DVDs were ramping up, and so there was all this work shooting behind the scenes on big budget movies. It was great, great learning. Okay, and I did a ton of that. And so I learned really quickly, like, okay, I know the camera angles, I know the lens, I know where I can stand because I know what lens are on, and I could figure out where to go. And I grew up in Iowa, so I was very respectful no matter what anyway. So it became really easy for me to do that. But when we were in school, we came out of there I think the majority of us came out of there with the impression that the job of the AD is to make the set go faster, just to make everybody go faster. And so you ended up with ADs who would say, like, how long do you need to set this thing up? And you go, well, I'd like 30 minutes, but I could probably have it done in 20. And they go, all right, you got 10. And you're like, all right, why'd you ask?
That's don't set people up like that. Tell them what you have.
And what would happen is that type of person, then if you tell me I've only got 10, then I'm going to have it ready in 10. And then now we shot it. And now at the end of the day, all of a sudden we're wrapping an hour early. Great. What did that gain us? Like it did. I'd rather have worked that whole hour and have a lot better product, and we would have better stuff. And then you go and you work on a set with a really good AD who says, how long do you need? And you say, I could probably have it done in 20, but I'd like half an hour. And they go, well, I can't even get the kids in here for 45. So you got at least 45. And you go, great. I'll have this done in half an hour, and I'll have the next one prepped a little bit, and then you get much better product all the way down. Yep. But the AD's job is to make the set run smoothly, and sometimes that means connecting people. Sometimes that means being a clown, keeping people entertained. Sometimes it's a job. Nobody ever comes to the AD and goes, "You were so on time today."
No.
They don't get any thanks.
Nope.
But the ones who are really good at it are indispensable.
You did one documentary, and I remember it, and I always thought it was the greatest name. It was called Popatopolis. How did that influence the way that you are able to create your own stories?
So the way that film came about in the first place was that I got hired to shoot a film for Jim Wynorski, who was the subject of Popatopolis. So yes. Popatopolis is about a B-movie filmmaker named Jim Wynorski trying to make a feature film in 3 days.
Yeah.
And prior to doing that, I got hired to shoot for him. So I was just coming out of grad school at USC. I got a call from Franchise, who had done like The Art of War, the whole 9 yards, and they said, you shoot high def, right? And I said, well, yeah. This was right when high def, like Star Wars Episode 1 was just about to come out. Like he had just shot it on the F900, and so like HD was kind of in its early infancy. So there weren't a lot of DPs that knew both photochemical and videotape.
Okay.
So they said, you shoot high def. I said, yeah. They said, well, do you want to come do reshoots on a film for us? I said, well, what is it? And they go, well, it's an action film that we scheduled for a 14-day shoot. And I said, well, geez, that's I don't know. That sounds a little rough. And they go, yeah, well, thing is, the crew, they shot it in Hawaii, and the crew shot the whole thing in 6 days and took the rest of the days off to go to the beach. So consequently, we don't have any wide shots in this movie. And I go, so you want to send me to Hawaii to shoot some beaches? They go, no, we want you to shoot in LA and make it look like Hawaii. They had literally shot everything in like one hotel room and changed the light from red to green to blue to like the whole, like to make it look like a different room each time. And everything was in wides. It was just, and I said, well, I don't know if I can make it look like Hawaii, but I think it'll look better than what you've got. And they're like, okay, so you're hired. And we fired the DP, we're going to hire you to shoot it. We fired the director. We're going to hire this guy, Jim, to come in and fix it. And my buddy Joel had been editing stuff for him. And he's like, look, just so you know, this guy yells a lot. He yells all the time. He's angry all the time, but he gets shit done. So, okay, but you'll be fine because you do good work and you work fast, so you'll be fine. You just be ready to be yelled at. I was like, okay, fine. And true to his word, I said, well, can I meet with? They said, no, he's way too busy. So, okay. I had to like struggle to get a VHS copy of the dailies to see what to match to. And they were not concerned about that. So I don't get to meet him until the first day of filming. So we're at day one on set. And I've got the F900. It's on a little Chapman Pee-wee dolly. And we had like a small grip, not a lot of stuff, but we had like, like a half-ton package, or maybe 1-ton package. And I had like maybe 8 crew. And so he walks in, like, bursts through the doors, and he's like, ah! He looks like, remember John Candy and Uncle Buck? He just like comes in like a storm, and he's like, who are you? And I go, hi, Clay Westervelt. And he's like, DP! And I go, yeah. And he's like, all right. And he's like, and he points at the camera, and he's like, video! And I was like, oh, Jesus. No, but they didn't even tell him that we're shooting. I go, look, it's HD. George Lucas just shot Star Wars. It's going to be good. And he's like, all right, listen. Is this whole thing handheld, or do you have a tripod? I was like, we have a tripod. It's sitting on a dolly. It's on a dolly right now. And I go, well, we have a tripod. And he goes, this is going to be great. And I was like, what is going on? He's so excited that we have a tripod. And that was the first glimpse into like what world he's coming from. And I was coming out of USC film school. And then it was everything after that, every single thing. I was like, this is a whole different world than what I was experiencing. And what it really came down to, there's like a million stories from that. And that was what inspired me to do the documentary. I was like, I would not know this world at all. Like, this is, but what really inspired it was like, there was a shot that he's like, I got to do a shot where they want me to do a shot where there's a gun. Like, we shot so much, like, really atrocious stuff, right? Like, this was not Coppola, right? Like, you know, and I say that I love Jim. Like, it was really, he was just a wild man. Like, he would go, we were shooting a big scene in the this bar that we closed down, and we did the wide shot, and I go, okay, what's next? And he's like, close up, right up here. We had Tracy Bingham for Baywatch was our lead, and I go, oh, okay, so close up on Tracy. He's like, yeah, right up here. And you don't want to shoot close up super wide in front, and especially not. And so I go, okay, if it's close up on her, look, I can get the same size shot, but I'll just march the camera back here. I'll go long on the lens. He's like, right up here. And I go, what? I go, look. We're matching. These are pickups. We're doing reshoots, and everything in this film, there are no close-ups on a wide-angle lens. Everything was shot wide, and then they just zoomed in the camera to get any of the close-ups. So for it to match, he's like, right up here. I was like, all right, and I just go, all right, fine. Just march the camera in, go, bring the fill in, and I yell up. He's like, great, and I yell up. I go to the lighting tech. I was like, Tommy, kick on the chase lights. He goes, leave them off. I hate them. And I looked at him and he goes, what are the chase lights? I go, there's flashing ones. We've had them on for every scene. And he's like, all right, those are good. Turn them on. And I was like, what is going on? And what it came down to, he would yell, but he loved everything that he was doing. And I hope that comes across in Popatopolis, because that was what I really took away from that. Was I felt like at the end of the day of shooting, like, we watched some dailies, and he's like, Clay, this looks like a movie. And I was like,
That's what we were shooting.
and even that early on, like, I was just out of film school, but like, I already was like, I was not amazed at, you know, or thrilled with anything. It was already feeling kind of like a job. Like, well, that was our job, right? Yeah. And this is a guy who's been doing it for over 20 years, right then. And he was just excited about what it looked like and excited about this stuff. And I thought, okay, there's something to learn here. Because, like, if I can do this job and every day come out feeling as excited about what I've done as he feels about what he's done, that will be a major accomplishment.
That's
and
huge.
There's definitely something to learn in that. You know?
That's massive.
Yeah.
Oh, I love that. I learned so much on independent, like, no budget films like that. Like, I learned every trick in the world. But I grew up watching horror films. So I felt like those horror films in the 70s is what turned into the independent films of the 80s and 90s. So,
like Fred Olin Ray saying he always carries around a miniature cop car in his trunk. Because then he's like, there's tons of times where you need a cop car, you don't have one. And so you set up the shot and you put it in the foreground, and nobody could tell the difference. And then they're walking past a cop car.
that's awesome.
You're like, yeah.
When you've done these documentaries, you've done a lot of them. What's the most, as you look back, what's one of the most memorable moments or scenes that you were very fortunate enough to be able to film?
There's a film that I did called I Am We, and it was about dissociative identity disorder.
Okay.
And I went into it not knowing very much about dissociative identity disorder, but it's like multiple personality disorder. Yep. It used to be called, and that condition is caused by repeated sexual abuse, typically by the primary caregiver, usually at a very young age. So you're talking about children, sometimes younger than 2 years old, who are abused by somebody who's the primary caregiver, somebody that they trust, right? So it's parents or grandparents or, you know, aunt, uncle, whatever, and a lot of times ritualistically. It's horrible, horrible stuff. Like some of the most horrible things that you could ever imagine. And it was the first time that so I was the cinematographer on it, and you can, when you're shooting an interview, like when you could tune out, like you could do your job okay, you could keep it in focus, keep the aperture set, like you could do your job technically and kind of tune out. And I thought, well, I can't do that to this woman. Like, she's sharing this stuff, like you have to be there for her, you have to like be there in that moment. And it was so excruciating, and the only thing that got me through it was knowing that like as difficult as this is for me, like think about what was going on for her, right? And I would say to the director, I cannot do 5 days straight of this. Like this, we got like there were so many times in that interview where I just want to turn off the camera and walk out the door and go buy a ticket to go back home and hug my kids. Like it was absolutely the most difficult time that I've had on set. And what really got me through it was like we broke for lunch one day, and everybody else just kind of cleared the room, and I lingered a little bit. I don't know, checking the batteries or something, and our subject stayed there, and she just stayed there sitting on the couch, and she's like, is any of this even interesting? And I was like, almost fell over, and I said to her, look, even if this movie never sees the light of day, even if no one else, if it never gets edited, it never gets out there, what you have shared today has already changed how I'm going to raise my kids. It's already changed the lives that they're going to have and how I'm going to take care of them. And so, and that made a huge difference to her, and she felt seen, and it was that, I mean, to talk about feeling privileged, to be able to be there for that moment, to be in the room, and to have someone trust you with that information is like, it's just one of the greatest gifts that I'll ever have.
The projects you did was on Poncho Barnes, right? Florence Barnes. How difficult as a story producer is it to try to tell a story that is that large and that has had a life that epic in only 60 to 90 minutes?
I was only the cinematographer on that project. So that's Nick Spark was the producer, and Amanda Pope, the director. And so they might have very different answers to that. Nick has an encyclopedic knowledge of like all of these things. So like, it's hard for me to imagine how difficult it is for him, because I think that his mind just works that way. I can say that from my experiences with it, the tricky things with putting that together were more the personalities that we're working with. One of which was Tony. Every year they would have a Lady Godiva thing, and so we were trying to get him to tell this story about how this Lady Godiva would come out riding on a bull, right? And so the salacious part of it is there's a naked lady riding on a bull, right? And so, but this guy, I learned so much about talking to people and how you experience the world through your own perception. And so he's like, well, we said, tell us about the bull. And that Lady Godiva was riding on the bull. He's like, well, wasn't a bull. Was a steer. Which just means it's a bull without any testicle. We're like, all right, well, tell us about the steer. Well, people were supposed to think it was a bull. I'm like, nobody cares about the bull. He's like, tell us about the naked woman riding on the... He's like, well, I don't know that she was naked. You're like, okay, could you just... He's like, well, people were supposed to think she was naked. People were supposed to think she was a bull. People were supposed to... And you're like, okay, just tell us that. And he's like, well, people were supposed to think that, and she came out with this long wig, and people were supposed to think it was a bull, and it's supposed to be a big deal. I didn't care. I seen that bull every day. You're like, okay.
You also did another documentary that I actually really dug. It was called Skum Rocks.
Oh.
Here's my question on that, because for the longest time I was back and forth. That's a real band, correct? That's not a fake band. That's not a mockumentary, right?
That movie is such a mind-bending thing because they're a group of guys who went to is it William and Mary College?
I don't remember the name of the college.
It's William and Mary College, and they're all soccer players.
Yep.
And they decided to start a band, and they just Hart Bauer is the ringleader of everything, and he's this terrific guy. We've stayed in touch. Like, he's a great guy. He is somebody who will get the cart so far ahead of the horse, like that, where he's like, that horse is really slowing us down. We don't need that horse anymore at all. And that was exactly what happened with them, where they basically decided they would promote the hell out of the parties, and they would make themselves the headliner. They just wanted to get girls. That was the whole thing. And so, but they would make themselves the headliner of the parties, but then none of them knew how to play any instruments. They were terrible. And so they were like, well, it doesn't matter, right? All we got to do is not play. Like, how hard is that? So they got good bands to open for them. The good bands would come in and open for them, and then they would have a huge party, right? And by the time it was time for them to take the stage, they would call the cops on themselves to shut down the party, which only means the next party is going to be even bigger. And they would just make sure that they would keep getting kicked out. And then, like, word kind of got around within the musicians community, where the real musicians are like, fuck you guys. You guys are assholes. You don't even know what you're doing. And they're like, why don't you come open for us? They're like, fuck you guys. We're not going to open for you. You don't even know what you're doing. And they're like, it's going to be a big party. You might want to come open for us. Like, God damn it. And they would have real good bands would come and open for them then. And they would just avoid playing every time. But, and by the time we got around to doing the movie, then they really wanted to be musicians.
Then they wanted to become the Monkees.
Yeah. The movie showed at Rain Dance in London.
That's right.
And so they went and recorded at Abbey Road.
So sorry. I'm falling out right now. I'm laughing so hard.
There's interviews with celebrities in there that are total bullshit, and interviews that are totally
Alice Cooper's in it, right?
Alice Cooper did the voiceover for the
That's
whole
right.
thing.
I
He did
just
the
forgot
voiceover.
about it. I just remember that.
We went on when the advertising tour started. Frankie Banali came into and went. He was on the radio with them and everything like that. He was like, "These guys are great." Like, it was like Jon Stewart is in there from the Daily Show, and none of that is fake. That is all stuff from Jon Stewart, because he played soccer with them. He played soccer with all those guys. He knew those guys.
Do you remember as far as dessert?
Oh, the birthday cake?
Every time we went to a restaurant?
I just told my daughters about that. It was like that is one of the things that I think people don't. We did not learn about that in grad school, in film school, about like how important it is to have a sense of camaraderie with your team,
Yep.
and how you get, I did a lot of stuff for like news and things like that, where you're working in like just a 2-person team. And if you get stuck with a rotten partner, it is not a fun day. It's terrible. You're all day with this idiot. But if you get with the right group of guys, and so the show we met on, like, it was a handful of guys that I knew and that I was good friends with, and then more than half all new people that did not know each other. And so when we got in, as far as I remember, we flew somewhere East Coast, and we landed, and we went, okay, and we got all the gear, and we got to go, and like, all right, how about dinner? We're gonna have dinner. You're like, yep, we got to stop for dinner. And I said, where are we gonna do that? You're like, don't know. Gotta keep your eyes out. And we're like, okay. And the first place that came up was a Chinese restaurant. Right. And so we had 2 vans, and you said, you guys go in, and I'll get the van parked. Okay. So we go in, and then assistant director was Ram. And so he and I don't know each other, but we're getting along pretty well so far from the van ride and the plane. And so then we walk in, and I don't know if I told you this part, but the way it started was that as we go in, we say, well, we need a table for whatever it was, like 8 people or something like that. They said, okay, well, we're closing soon, but they said, okay, we can do it. I said, okay. And then I said, do you have any specials? And her English was not that good. I said, do you have any specials? She goes, special? And I go, yeah, do you have any specials? She's like, you have special? And I go, no, do you have specials? And she goes, oh, like birthday? And I was like, and I looked at Ram and he goes, yes. And she goes, is somebody birthday? And I go, yes. And she goes, okay, who birthday? And I said, and we kind of looked at each other and he goes, I think it's Aaron's birthday. And I go, I think you're right. And so you weren't there. We all go sit down. And of course, we take our orders and we say, by the way, this birthday guy, he's going to sit right there. Okay. And so they took care of it. And by the time, and then your reaction when the cake came out, we had a great dinner, but when your reaction when the cake came out, I don't know if you remember this either, but you told me, you were like, I feel so bad. It's one of your guys' birthdays. I didn't even know. Oh my God. And they're singing happy birthday. And you're like, I feel like such a jerk. And then the plate gets set right in front of you. It was awesome.
And you did that at every restaurant we went to from that point on.
Every
time. I went to my room one night I was like, all right, when you're on the road and you're like, I just need a night away from everyone. I'm just going to eat in my room and read and go to bed. I was sitting there just doing a little work and there's a knock on my door. I'm like, what is that? And I open the door and there's a lady. She goes, happy birthday. She's got like rice pudding. And I'm like, they sent it from the
It's because we were out, the rest of us were out at Benihana's. Right. And we were all having dinner, and we couldn't convince you to go.
Yep.
And then Ram was like, we can't let him get away with that. So we called the hotel. We got the front desk, and we said, we need a piece of birthday cake, and we need it sent to Aaron Waiton's room. And the guy at the desk goes, birthday cake? And we go, yeah. And he goes, are you sure? And we're like, yeah. Why? And he goes, well, he just ordered a whole pie. So we're like, yeah, send it. And you told us afterwards, you were like, I was just sitting there, and the guy knocked on the door, and then I opened the door, and there's a guy, I'm sorry, I don't have any ice cream. And he had like a candle in it?
It was rice pudding with a candle in it. it was one of those like Midwestern like little vases of rice pudding with some raisins on it.
And as I recall, then Ron was like, and then Leah, the director, didn't come out with us that night either.
That's right.
So he said, charge it to her room.
He was a funny guy. He went on to do he was an AD on that Get Out, that movie.
Oh, really?
Yeah, he was on the AD team that won all of that. Yeah, he went on to do all of that. Yeah.
Wow.
Yeah, he did really well.
Yeah. He was a great guy.
Oh,
we stayed with that for every single dinner we had, and the final dinner was in Denver, Colorado.
And I got pictures of that with balloons.
It's because my cousin lived in Denver.
That's right.
And so I called ahead and I invited her out to dinner with us, and she was like, great. I go, there's one condition. You got to show up with balloons. And so she had all these balloons already tied onto your chair before you got in.
I got in. There was I think it was like a 40. I think she actually put the 40 out at some point. Like there was numbers, there was balloons.
Oh, that could be, yeah.
It was all kinds of stuff. She had like a lot there. I was looking at those pictures, and what really pissed me off was how fat I was. I was huge. I was like, I ate all of that cake. When you said oh, he ordered himself a pie, it was like, yeah. You see the pictures of me? I was taking down a whole pie without blinking.
Totally believable.
Oh, I was like, oh yeah, I just eat everything on the road. You've worked with the SAG Foundation about doing, and you worked with, I believe some of the people you worked with in that were like Elijah Wood and Betty White, doing stuff for children and towards that. Can you tell me a little bit about that? And before we go any further, what is Betty White like? Because that's the one for me. She's one of those ones that we all have like famous people that you're lucky enough. Oh, I got to interview with that guy, but Betty White.
Yeah, she was awesome.
Yeah.
So we shot Betty White on her birthday.
Oh!
And I found out that she liked carrot cake, I think, for some reason.
Look at that. See, it all full circles to the birthdays. You love the birthdays. But what were those projects? What was the project for the SAG Foundation?
It was that was a project that there were multiple different ones I did for SAG Foundation. legacy project, and that one was called Storyline Online. And the idea was for kids to be able to go onto YouTube and have the experience of an adult they recognize reading to them. So we did it initially. We did it really old school, where we couldn't afford to do motion control cameras for the movements, so you set up the book on an art stand and like pan, and zoom and things like on the artwork. And the idea was to put up. Eventually, we would do it in Photoshop or After Effects and animate it a little bit, but never so much that it felt like a cartoon. Just so that it kind of brought a little bit of life to the page. And it was interesting though, because you'd work with somebody like Elijah Wood, and you'd think, well, this is just, this is a kid's show. Like, it's not, you're just reading a book. Like, I've seen your work. Like, you're amazing. Like, you don't need anything from me. And that was a huge mistake, because like, they're still actors and they're still nervous, because right now they're not being a character. They're going on as themselves. And so they do still need you to say like, that is cool when you play that character, when I like the grandma voice you came up with. That was really, and they need that feedback, that was interesting to learn. James Earl Jones was one of them. And when he did it, I did not know that he was dyslexic, but like he
I didn't know that either.
Yeah, he said, this is going to be hard for me because I'm dyslexic, and like I used to not be able to read at all. And I was like, oh, okay. Whoa. And he was fantastic. And he would read it, and he'd do a line, and then he'd go, nope, that was not right. And he'd back up, and he would do it again. And he was just like a consummate professional, wonderful man, and just a treat to be around.
We was always the conversation, and you've always heard the horror stories about like a bad meal or bad set meals or bad lunches. Go the opposite way. What's your most memorable, enjoyable, fun meal that you've ever had on a set, with the exception of birthday cakes?
Right. I mean, there's certainly been some really good like surf and turf on the on the big movies like that. Like that's pretty great.
Yeah.
And
surf and turf.
We had lobster and steak on one of the. I think it was on. On Red Dragon, maybe.
You were on Red Dragon?
Is it behind the scenes? Yeah. It was awesome. I got to see Sir Anthony Hopkins performing Hannibal Lecter in that set, the same, they had rebuilt the set from Silence of the Lambs where he's in that. It was amazing. Amazing.
I love Red Dragon. Red Dragon was my favorite of them because that's the closest one back to Manhunter, which was the original Michael Mann.
I haven't seen Manhunter. Is
Michael
that great?
Mann, because Michael Mann directed it, right?
Yeah.
So he's the only guy that can get away with putting completely blue lights on at night. Like, you know what I mean? Like, whenever you see like a really deep blue at night, you're like, come on, nights aren't this blue. What are you doing? Right. But the second Michael Mann does it, you're like, oh, it's a Michael Mann. That's a Michael Mann blue. And that whole movie is like that.
It's shot by the same DP.
Oh, it's amazing. That original one. That's what I liked about it was it had all the elements of Silence of the Lamb, but it made it more real. Like, I think in Silence of the Lambs he comes in and he's like, oh, you're wearing so-and-so skin cream, but not today. And he's like smelling the air. I like in Manhunter, the original, what's his name? Hannibal Lecter. He's just lying in his cell. And the guy walks in and he goes, oh, you're wearing that same horrible aftershave in court, like that. And he's just like, then he turns over and looks at him. But it's like, that's a little bit more real than just smelling the air and going from there. But I loved that movie. That was one of my favorites.
I got to check that one out.
Oh, I remember when Red Dragon came out, and it was like, for you to be on that set, that's just amazing to me.
It was incredible.
Plus surf and turf, that's not fair.
Yeah, it was. I think the first. I don't know if it was it might have been the first day that I was on the set. They were shooting. It was the scenes in the asylum.
Okay.
And so I don't know if you remember that.
Yep.
Like,
Oh yeah.
Crazy, cool down lighting that was like really hot and it was awesome. But like my call as BTS was later than the rest of the crew. So when I roll into this play, I've never been to this set before, but I come in, everybody else is already in there working. So like I come in this kind of side door because it's the most obvious one to go in, and then there's this like big courtyard, and like I'm walking across it, and there's all these extras there, like playing asylum inmates or whatever, and they're like kind of like nodding and doing weird stuff, and like and I was like, man, these guys are really, for extras, they're like really into it, like to the point where like halfway across the yard, I was like looking around like, are they rolling? Like, am I blowing a shot right now? I'm carrying all my gear in, and I was like, oh no, what is happening? And I get 3/4 of the way across the yard, and then a guard comes up to me, and I was like, I screwed this up. And he's like, are you here with the film crew? I go, yeah. And he goes, this is an active asylum. You were in the wrong place. You're supposed to. And I was like, oh, he's like, you do not want to be in here right now. And I'm like, okay. And so he takes me over to where he's like, don't ever come over here. I was like, all right. Don't. and then I say to the so now I get the camera out, and I say to the publicist, I was like, will you introduce me to the director? You want to get introduced. You want them to know that you are here for Universal. You're not, or I think it was a Universal thing, not with Entertainment Tonight or Access Hollywood or whatever. Yep. Like, I'm on your side. If anything tension is going on, my camera's going down. I'm not shooting. I'm on your team. I'm here to make you look good. So don't worry. Like, yep. You want that out there so they know who you are and they're not nervous around. And I was like, will you introduce me? And he was like, no, I'm not gonna. I was like, will you introduce me to Anthony Hopkins so at least he knows who I am? He's like, no, I'm not gonna do that. And I was like, okay, what the? Oh, fine. So like now I'm like nervous. I'm like, well, how's this good? Like, because it could be nerve wracking. No. Like, you don't want somebody in here like filming everything. And so I'm out there then shooting B-roll because Anthony Hopkins is not on set, and so I'm shooting B-roll. I'm getting like stuff with the lights and like, whatever, just editing pieces, and then as I'm doing that, I'm shooting straight up, and then there's some tap on my shoulder, and I turn around, and it's Sir Anthony Hopkins, and he goes, "Hi, I'm Tony," and I was like, "Oh my god!" And I was like, and I introduced myself, and he's just like the sweetest, nicest guy, and he finishes by, he goes kind of like this. Okay, so I put the camera up, and he just goes. Like, all right. It was awesome. That's awesome. He was just incredible.
That's amazing.
And then I got to do a thing with him for the SAG, where they had a program where you'd have like 100 people in a live audience. They do a screening of a film, and then have the actor come and talk to the live audience. So like a couple years later, we screened World's Fastest Indian that he starred in.
Yep.
And we're watching the film, and like before the credits roll, like everything's set up and we're waiting. I'm just watching the film, and then usually I'd go back to the green room and introduce myself before they would come out, and then I'd just say, this is what the setup is, this is how it goes. It's like a 2-minute talk. But the staff came out and found me in the screening room, and they go, Sir Anthony Hopkins is here, and I was like, okay, great. And I said, I'll be back when the credits start rolling. And they go, actually, can you come back now? And I go, what? And they go like, well, he's really nervous. And I was like, what? They're like, he's nervous, so can you come back and talk to him? And I was like, okay. And I go back, and again, just another really eye-opening moment. Like, I don't know anybody that is more accomplished than him. But I went back, I introduced myself. I said, we met on Red Dragon, actually, and you may not remember. We just talked a little bit, small talk, and then I said, the crowd is really loving that movie. He's like, are they? And I go, yeah. I said, you're fantastic. And he's like, oh, well, thank you. And he totally relaxed. It's just stuff, like, you don't know unless you live in somebody else's shoes for a little bit. Like, what is that experience like? And it always amazes me how often it's surprising what the other person's experience is really like.
Clay, I want to thank you so much for being here today. Thank you for everything. It was awesome. Did you have fun?
I had a blast.
That's awesome. Thank you so much for being here. I appreciate it.
Thank you for having me.
No, not at all.